Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your Sun and Rising sign horoscopes for the month of July 2020. This month there's a lot of things going on. I've broken it into three major groups of transits that we're going to be talking about in this video for the fire signs. So we're going to be looking at Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and taking a look at these three major categories. One will be a bunch of planetary oppositions and events happening across the Cancer and Capricorn axis. Another is going to be a Mercury-Mars square that's happening between Cancer and Aries. And then last but not least, toward the end of the month, we're going to be looking at a Venus-Neptune square. So I've got these as like the three big transits of the month, telling a story, especially across the house axis for each sign, the Cancer-Capricorn house axes. So that's what we'll take a look at for starters. All right, so the month really gets started right around the 4th when we have a lunar eclipse in Capricorn. That's happening if you're in Aries rising in your 10th house, Aries sun or Aries rising. Now, the 10th house is going to be the place of your career, your action in the world, reputation in the world. So there's a lot of changes happening there, and there have been for about a year and a half with eclipses happening in these signs of Cancer and Capricorn. Now, if you move forward between the 12th through the 21st of the month, there's going to be a series of oppositions from the Sun to Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in your 10th house, and then a new moon in Cancer on the 20th in your 4th house. So that's a big deal because it's putting a lot of tension around the houses of work in the world, reputation, action out in the world, and your ambitions out in the world, and the house of home, family, parents, land, property, roots, and foundation. So when tension comes in between those two places, it's usually a way of saying, look, you're moving and you're starting a new job, or something's changing at your job while there are simultaneously a lot of demands coming a lot of demands placed on you coming from home and family, or you're remodeling your house and you're looking for a new job, but those two areas of life are really lit up right now if you are an Aries rising or Aries sun sign. So I recommend using your rising sign, by the way, always. But at any rate, so that's where the tension exists. In new moon, so there's kind of a new seed being planted around home and family. Eclipsing events, meaning really culmination, closure, completing types of events around career, and you may not notice them right away. Sometimes these eclipse cycles take a few months to play out. So watch for these changes to come over the rest of the summer. Now that again, the lunar eclipse is on July 4th. The new moon in Cancer is on the 20th. The 12th through the 21st, the Sun in the 4th opposes all of those planets, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn in the 10th house. A lot of tension between the roots and the work out in the world. You think of the 10th house as your day job. You think of the 4th house as your bedroom, right? So they're just, and you could think of all the different kinds of thematic tensions that exist between those two areas of life. You're the private space of your life and the public space of your life. And just look and see how those areas become more intense as the month goes on, especially the middle of the month. Now, between the 7th and 8th of the month, Mercury is going to move into a square with Mars, who is in your home sign. Now that's a great thing if you're in Aries. Like you should have a lot of the rest of this year is really, if you're in Aries rising, is really your year because your home planet is in your home sign, your first house. It's going to do a big long retrograde later in the year. So there's a lot of deep personal changes that you're going through this year if you're in Aries, and reconfiguring your sense of who you are, where you're going, what you want to do, and probably because there's some way in which you go through a period of being both in power and then sort of out of control of the plot and then back in control. And that's going to happen as the year goes on. Anyway, part of the dialogue, though, has to do with the topic of home and family obligations and responsibilities that might be kind of presenting themselves to you at a time where you're feeling like you want to be more independent or more in a position of self-reliance. That's the Mercury retrograde squaring Mars in your first house. So issues around home and family kind of presenting themselves in maybe a more critical or harsh dialogue, maybe a little bit of an intensity emotionally in communication around the topic of home and family is very personal, affecting you. And be careful for the little volatility of this transit that can peak, especially between July 7th and 8th, and then again on the 27th of the month at the very end. Now, if you go forward from there, at the very end of the month, between the 26th of the month and the 27th, we have Venus getting into a square with Neptune. Now, for you, this is going to come between your third house and your 12th house. Now, this can be one of those very enchanting transits, Venus Neptune, that is romantic and sort of otherworldly and creative and sensual. But with the 12th house involved, you want to be especially careful of deception, gossip, deceit, things like that, because the 12th house can be a little underhanded, or we can undermine ourselves, or other people can undermine us a little bit in the 12th house. This can also have something to do with media and issues around media or technology, writing, communication, misunderstandings, gossip, secrecy, also potentially creative transmissions, and the way that you relate to others, or the topic of learning, and some degree of again, like looking at the shadows in these places. For example, can't tell you how many times I've had clients dealing with 3rd to 12th house transits when something happens to them on social media that changes their life. Like, for example, it could be something relatively simple, but it's like, oh, I got into a fight, I realized that social media is eating up all my life and I'm going to quit Facebook or something like that. Oftentimes it's a 3rd house, 12th house dynamic where elements of your communication with other people, you're coming to understand something of your own shadow, or the need for a different way of life, and needing to retreat or withdraw from something. So watch for your communication dynamics to speak to you about something, and be especially careful to be discerning, because Venus Neptune can also have this very glamorizing, intoxicating effect, and can be very persuasive and sort of subtly convince you of things that may not be entirely healthy or even true. So that energy comes in around the 26th and the 27th. And, again, maybe on the positive side, creative flow states can be amplified during this time, and inspiration that you get in more private, or what I want to say, contemplative spaces could be really great. All right, so that's if you're an Aries rising. Let's wind it back up and go to Leo. We're going to go back to July 4th and take a look at the eclipse in the sign of Capricorn. And we're going to put Leo on the ascendant now. Okay, so if you're a Leo, this energy of the eclipse, the lunar eclipse on July 4th, is going to be happening in your 6th house. And then we have 4th into the 5th, you'll be feeling it. And then the oppositions for the month, including eventually the new moon in Cancer on the 20th, come from the sun in Cancer moving through the 12th house and opposing Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in your 6th. So the 12th house, 6th house dynamic is tough. I like to think of these houses as the karmic work houses. These are the houses where we tend to reap what we've sown, and the results are often difficult or taxing, or require hard work or labor or some form of sacrifice. We learn and see our shadows. We deal with things through conflict or hardship, and we can come out, just fine. Good things take hard work. But you kind of have to know what territory you're in when you've got eclipses and a lot of action happening across these house axes, which is like, it may be tough sledding. So, be careful of your expectations. Most of the time, I find that with 12th and 6th house oppositions, it's our expectations that everything should go perfectly and everything should be in our control that really end up spinning us out. Whereas things start happening and you feel like you're losing the plot, and there's just kind of feels like it's a month where heaviness or difficulties are coming up, that you take that time to get quiet, to listen, to slow down, and to say, what's the meaning in this? What's here for me to learn in this? And to, resist the urge to try to bowl through or bulldoze through difficulties. At the same time, sometimes it's just a crunch. It's just a period of having to work really hard through something and knowing that the sacrifice will be worth it. This could also have something to do with themes of hardship or difficulty that are ancestral or related to family karma, because you got that Cancerian energy in the 12th house. Okay, so if you look again, especially between, say, let's go back here to about the 7th of the month, you're going to see Mercury and Mars get into a square with one another from the 9th to the 12th house, which could point to a certain degree of mental or emotional conflict, especially around like political or religious beliefs, or just more that tendency to be in a combative mood or space with others, especially related to things that you believe. Just religion and politics, just be careful of it this month, especially around the 7th and 8th of the month, and then repeating again on the 27th of the month. Those two moments are spaces where things can escalate more quickly than is good. And you can also find that you have a more like a short fuse emotionally. And it may be a time where you have to speak up or speak out about something, but make sure you do it directly and not in a passive aggressive manner or secretive or trying to undermine someone. Be careful of just those kinds of dynamics, because you could end up being undermined by them in the process. Now, if we take a look toward the very end of the month, the last dynamic that I've got for you this month is the Neptune-Venus transit. And this is happening from your 11th to 8th house, as Venus in Gemini in the 11th house is finishing up a long stay in the 11th house and then making a square to Neptune in Pisces in your 8th house. So Venus-Neptune across the 11th and the 8th can bring up a number of different themes. A lot of them are going to have to do with the deeper level of, let's say, obligations or soul, almost like karmic contracts or debts that we have to other people and that other people have to us, especially within groups or organizations or your larger social scene or colleagues or people that you would consider to be supportive of you or that you would share something in common with. The 11th house is kind of a house where it's like, it's a networking house. It has a lot to do with those people that are here to be our allies in life for our goals and ambitions. That doesn't always mean they're good for us. And with the 8th house Neptune dynamic, sometimes we'll pay too high a price for the appreciation or help or benefits of other people. So being used or using others can come up when these two houses get together. The other thing can be about things that you owe people or that people owe you that might be actually very beneficial in some way. And so, sometimes we discover that we are the inheritors of some good fortune when this kind of transit occurs. We also have to be careful just about glamour and what we find appealing or what we are, this is the house where you could easily sell out somehow. So be careful of compromising your values around that topic. Of course, the upside of that Venus-Neptune transit is sometimes meeting truly magical people that have something really special to add to your life. And that would be the most positive version of the transit, you could say. All right, so let's go all the way back and take it back for Sagittarius. So we're going to go back again to July 4th. And on July 4th, we've got the lunar eclipse in Capricorn. And we are going to put Sagittarius on the ascendant. So when Sagittarius is on the ascendant, the 2nd and 8th house axis is highlighted, which means you've got a lunar eclipse in your financial house to start the month. Then you've got a new moon in Cancer on the 20th and a bunch of oppositions from the Sun in Cancer to Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in Capricorn from the 12th through, say, the 21st. So the 2nd and 8th house dynamic is just very lit up for you this month. And that typically means the difference between my stuff, my resources, my money, my business, my finances, my bills or obligations, and the things that I have to rely on or that I don't have to rely on. So just the state of what you're in possession of and what resources you have around you. And this could tie into the themes of family as well because of the Cancer axis being a part of this. How do I stand alone versus what am I in need of and where do I help others or where do they help me is going to be a real part of this month because we also have so much energy being emphasized in the Cancerian 8th house, which has a lot more to do with shared money, shared resources, or other people's money or other people's resources and other people's values and what other people have or are in possession of versus what we are. And so the comparisons around value and worth and money and income and debts and obligations and the balance of those factors around, especially around family and in relationships, should be pronounced this month. Then the other thing that's happening is right around the 7th and 8th of the month, you're going to see Mercury in Cancer get into a square with Mars. And you can see this happening between the 8th and the 5th house. This can be a little bit more turbulent moment emotionally and mentally, can bring up, kind of a more analytical or critical quality in communication. It can be about analyzing or dissecting each other, in ways that aren't always nice. We could also see this as an energy of uh, combativeness in the family and around children, around the topic perhaps of children and family in particular. This is also a time where there can be the potential for there to be um, what do I want to say? Hostility because of what a person feels they are owed, or what a person feels they are not obligated to do, or that, in those conversations. And also, the fifth house is with Mars is in the fifth house. There's often it's a very competitive placement. There's a lot of joy in competition, but Mercury in the eighth may feel a little bit more sensitive and needy. So the balance between trying to be your own thing, do your own thing, feel strong in your own right, and then feeling sort of obligated to others, or you know feeling like you need to adapt who you are, how you're presenting yourself to the world because of what other people are asking or needing from you. And that may be a little bit tense and could rain on your parade a little bit this month, but there's something in it for you to learn if you're listening carefully, I think. All right, so now, when we go forward to say the 27th of the month, that Mercury Mars dynamic is going to come back. So at the end of the month, it comes back again. And then at the very end of the month, Venus is going to square Neptune. You're going to see this right around the 26th and 27th. Here's Venus in Gemini in your 7th house, squaring Neptune in the 4th house. So this is a emphasis on relationships, love, sexuality, and maybe your living environment. You guys see these kinds of dynamics come up when you're thinking of moving in with someone, or there's difficulty in living with someone, or there's the change of people that you're living with, or your roommates going through a breakup and it's impeding on your space. But the topic of love and relationships and how they relate to the home, the family, the roots are going to be important. This can also sometimes bring up issues around family and marriage, differences between families, your family, your in-laws, stuff like that, and can also sometimes bring up questions about a partner's identity, a partner's job, things happening in a partner's life that are somehow very important, but could also be a little overwhelming this month. So those are some of the main transits to look for if you are a Sagittarius rising. So that, again, if you're Sag rising, the majority of the month, right, is between that 2nd and 8th house. So really strong emphasis on finances, money, and so forth. So that's what I've got for you, fire signs, this month. I hope that this was easy to follow along with. Please leave me your stories in the chat box. I'd love to hear from you guys and hear how these stories go. Come back throughout the month and re-listen and then leave new notes. I love seeing how the progression happens in real time. Sometimes you reflect at the beginning of the month, you don't really know what's going to happen yet. So hearing your stories as the month goes on is also really valuable. All right, you guys have a great month of July, and we'll see you again in August.